Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Down and Dirty. And today we're going to get down and dirty with Anupriy Kanti. He has an illustrious career as a designer, and I've decided that rather than me introduce him, he is going to introduce himself, and then we will dive right into his day-to-day life and the tools that he uses. Anupriy.
Sure. Thank you, Tapsi, for calling me here. Lovely to meet you here. So I have like around 14 years of design experience with 12 years in UX and been managing teams and working on different products and all. And alongside, I have my passion on mythology, prehistory, and space exploration. So I try to create content around that, or I've just started doing that.
Right, three different platforms that you're managing along with your career as a designer. I don't want you to shy away from some of the really big brand names that you've worked with. Like, can you name some of the brands that you've worked with?
Sure, Tapsi. I mean, I have the privilege of working with brands like IKEA, Make in India, then Discovery. Right now, I was working with Zeta, so I was working on the new product that they're going to be launching for HDFC, and right now I'm working with Infra.Market itself on their products and all.
Got it, got it. So for someone who might want to understand more what, someone at your leadership level in design does on a day-to-day basis, can you just walk me through what's a day in your life like? Like if you wake up just a normal, ordinary day, as the guy leading design at Infra Capital, let's say, or Infra.Market, how does that work?
Sure, Kavli. So first of all, I think now that I'm at a manager level, obviously my day to day is never the same. I mean, I would love to say that I just get up and I do the thing, because a lot of the work is strategic in nature, but it's also about guiding, mentoring the teams, managing the projects and all. So automatically, apart from if it's maybe it could be a firefighting moment where you just need to solve a problem quickly. Two, it could be like, okay, what more can we do, right? Now in Infra.Market, I've just recently joined, but like if I have to talk about a typical day, the first thing I have to do is I have to sync up with my team, the immediate reportees or the designers, the thing. So in different companies, obviously the structures was different in terms of the project. So sometimes the reportees were the people who are working on one project. But like sometimes it's like you're helping with the full studio or the department itself as a lead and manager, and obviously you're in touch with your own manager, maybe the design director, or the currently like it's the the AVP of design itself. And yeah, you are trying to make sure that okay, if there is some work that was pending, that's going on, it's going in, it's going fine, there is no issue itself. Or it could be sometimes it's like, if we've been doing this work, what more can we do? Could we take today to explore it? So I can be that person sometimes where in my team, where it's like, I know what we are doing, but what about this, right? And sometimes I'm the other way around, like, okay, no, I think let's focus and let's finish this task. Uh, yeah.
Okay, so when do you normally wake up in the morning?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I said, what time do you normally wake up in the morning?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a controversial this thing. Like, I would like to say what I've been doing the last 1 week has been getting up at like around 6:37 and going to the gym, but that's not really my routine all the time. It's just something I have tried to do that, especially with my wife, who's actually someone who gets up early. But like, yeah, if I'm a nocturnal person. I'm not someone who wakes up in the morning, and I'm definitely someone who likes to even do something until I have my coffee and all, coffee or tea. So I try to get up, whatever time in the morning, like anything between 7 to like 8, 9 o'clock. And currently, in Infra.Market, you're supposed to go to the office and all. There was a time where things were remote. When I was in Zeta, I had to do remote working also. So obviously, the time you get up and you get ready was slightly different. But whatever happens, by around 9:30, 10, you're ready, and then you're in the office mode.
Office mode. So you said you're a nocturnal being. Is this when you stay up at night, is that just personal time, or are you actually working at night? Generally.
It is personal, but I would say like especially on my platforms that I have where I'm doing on my, doing all the passion projects and all, that is my time. I mean, it borderlines into like, revenge sleep procrastinations, like, okay, the full day I was working on the professional work and all. So let me do my reading, let me do my writing and all, sometimes to the point of even like, binge watching TV shows for research purposes and all. Anything that happen, it's at night. Obviously, it's not sustainable, but first instinct is to stay up late night and do those things. It just doesn't have the same zing when you try to do it in early morning. You feel like you need to be productive in the morning. Yeah.
Okay. So you have your own passion projects that you are dealing with at night. It makes me wonder then, in the day when you need to be in work mode and you've kind of compartmentalized, okay, this is where I've got to do, right now infra's work, or you Zeta or wherever you were before that. Are you someone who cares, how much rather do you care about things like efficiency and productivity and optimizing workflows? Like how important is it for you to be on top of things versus letting the day reveal itself to you?
I think I am a big productivity junkie. I mean, to be honest, I not only consume enough content on like, how to, maximize your productivity and all, obviously in a healthy, sustainable way, not not at the cost of your happiness or your what you're passionate about. But I believe a lot in workflows, and to be honest, even in terms of compartmentalizing, the thing is that I'm always keen on knowing what can influence what, because sometimes your creative feed, like at work, may not always come from just design work. It can come from your passion and your reading of something completely else. In fact, as a UX designer, you're trying to empathize and understand how you can improve the systems and experience for the users, right? So I do have to consume a lot, and I think what I end up doing many times in terms of workflow is that I'm trying to always come up with better frameworks, processes for my team and for myself. I mean, obviously, I would never implement, or I would never do something that I don't follow it myself. So even if I'm thinking of a new way of like let's work, I would try it out on certain tools, and sometimes on my own, try to make some sort of a proof of concept of that and then take it to my team. And right now, obviously, a lot of the time goes into like, okay, I've made a framework or I've made a conceptualized a workflow, but is it going to get adopted by the team, right? I mean, it's very great to have something, but then just sit on the shelf. So sometimes it becomes like, okay, don't make the entire workflow, don't detail it out to the point that, like it's overwhelming for your team and your colleagues to follow it up, but get the ball rolling, germinate that the seed of thought of here's the process, and get them in, get them to collaborate with you in trying to test the system out to see if this workflow works. What I say, like, apply the UX principles on your workflow itself, not just on your projects, right? Yeah.
Got it. So let's kind of double down on that. I see, from someone who's implementing workflows in order to be more productive, I can see the reward there, right? That you seek, right? It's like just a more optimum experience of getting shit done, like on time, in a way that is efficient. There are no ball drops anywhere. It's like a nice closed tight ecosystem, right, to manage things end to end. Also, it's a great way to scale things, right, because then you have a process in place. You don't need to keep explaining things to people. So I see the reward there. But what are some of the challenges with obsessing, if I might say that, about workflows and productivity? What have you experienced in your career managing?
No, that's a very interesting question, Tapsi. And I think, in fact, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I kind of feel in the last few years, especially last 2 years, I've kind of noticed that I'm spending more time on the challenges. There's a very interesting adage which suddenly changed my perception towards the workflows and all, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And which means that as a person who sees themselves as a strategic person, who sees, I can make all the frameworks and like nice processes and all, but then if you have to, if you want to make a dent, you have to get it embedded in culture. And if the culture is not conducive to the thing, they don't want to change it. Because think about productivity. You're making a workflow, you're trying to make things more transparent, you're trying to make things more accountable, you're trying to make things more faster. But if the people in the team are not up to that, that for them that feels like the change itself is going to be too much, and at this point in time they're comfortable with the systems, right? So I think what has happened in the recent this thing is that while working on frameworks and processes and flows, I have tried to switch gears into first looking at the culture and trying to see how you can influence culture and then create frameworks that will help sustain that culture. Especially as a manager, right? I mean, it's that thing where it's like, okay, here's how we do it, right? That's a simple, like an authoritative way of doing it. But
Top-down
that
approach.
doesn't work.
Correct.
That doesn't work all the time. And
Yeah.
especially I would say as a middle management, I mean, you could do that to maybe your
Yeah.
team, but then it doesn't have, it's not really fulfilling. So how do you make changes or affect the culture for your for your senior managers and senior stakeholders, while also giving space to your team to do that experiment, to do follow that, right? So your frameworks are no longer about how to do it, but creating the guardrails for them to experiment sometimes, right?
And how do you do it is my question. Like, what are you trying out in order to influence culture before you impose a framework on them?
So it depends on what level I'm working on. One of the things I've started moving towards, and I think even right now when I joined this new company, one was also about that. Okay, one is trying to finish a project and how do you make the most efficient way of doing a project. But another is how do you create and sustain design practices and design culture, right? Like if you're creating a team, so for example, if you're building a content team or you're building a design team, because right now in many companies there are developers, fair number of developers. There are maybe a few, designers and all, even though designers are always trying to fight for the seat at the table. But there will be very few content or few or none content, people itself, right? So something that I did in the previous two companies was trying to bring the content things, right? So it's a culture plus a framework question, right? One of the things I do in that is that I am a big sucker for having playbooks.
Okay.
And I'll probably show the playbook itself. But just to say, a playbook for me is not just something like a guideline that is just sitting in a shelf which someone consumes as a manual. A playbook is a living, breathing artifact where you are basically giving your team some some tools and tips that they can use while in the while working. Okay, an analogy I'll give you to you is something like a playbook would be something like, if you see Dungeons and Dragons or like, the D&D games and all, right? What the dungeon master makes in terms of the game. And when people go into it, they look for the dungeon master, to look at their playbook and to ultimately to follow it up so as to collaborate and to thrive together, right? Initially it'll start off probably as like a coach and a player mechanism where here's a playbook, here's how we're going to win the thing. But then you want to move away from that finite mindset, as Simon Sinek says, that you want to move away from that. You're not fighting with another team, right? You're working with the team to do the output. So that is where the playbook becomes an important thing. And now playbook can happen in different sense. If you want, I can share and can show you a thing itself.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes.
Awesome. 1 second. Just So obviously, I have made playbooks for the companies itself. So those playbooks are different names. I mean, the company names itself. This is a playbook. I'm kind of making a template version of it, which will get re-enhanced and all. So the MET is basically a master edition extended template that I'm exclusive template that I'm making. At some point in time, I do plan to have this also on the Notion galleries for other people to consume, as a session and all. So yeah, I'm a big Notioneer. That's one thing.
I was just going to say, just to step back, this is all happening on Notion. So the assumption here is that when you are thinking about productivity and workflows, or even playbooks before you get into workflows, this is where the magic is happening. This is a platform that you use to do all of that.
So I'm pretty tool agnostic, and for a very right reason. So because the number of products and number of tools that are coming are changing. Like in the current company, they use Confluence. Designers use Figma. Before that, they used to use XD, and also I do have to be a little careful about not getting too too wrapped up in one tool. I mean, it's like if you think of presentations and you do PPT, and then suddenly you don't have Microsoft Office and you're using Google. It changes the notion, but you have to understand what a tool is good for and what is, what it isn't good for, right? So I would say that I definitely start with a tool agnostic way, but then I do assess that if I want to create a playbook or I want to create an artifact, what is the best tool? What will get adopted? I mean, I've had this problem where I would start working on a tool, and just because no one else uses the tool, it is not getting adopted, right? So it is something thing. So honestly, I made playbooks on spreadsheets also, because spreadsheets are the easiest thing to consume. But I would say that because I do love Notion, obviously a personal preference and my personal first, first mode of attack of attacking an idea to have it written down, to articulate it and all, it's on Notion, because my entire life is on Notion right now. So I would start there, and at least my personal work, I would have it here. Professional work, I may type my stuff here, then I would transport it to whatever tool that is required.
Okay.
In terms of playbook, I definitely would say that one of the reasons I use Notion for my playbook, and I do believe that was a good option, was that okay, it could have been on a Word doc, but the problem with the Word doc is it becomes a document rather than it becomes like a I would say a portal where you can go into different things. So right here itself, right? Like I have a playbook, and then you can have the quick links to different sections and all. And as you can see, I've given a sync note so that it's there on every page. So if I want to update something, it just gets updated on every page. That's something that I can do. What are the tables and itself, version control itself, this thing. So again, as I said, this is a draft, this is a template version. So I've just talked about it, okay, if this is a draft done, then how different walkthroughs can itself happen before you hand it over to someone itself, right? Obviously, because it's a playbook, this starting page will always have all the, I would say, the documentation, what is the purpose of the playbook and other things itself. Anything that can help someone consuming the playbook through this link itself to know what we want to do. This thing. And I also try to make sure that we want to make it clear that this playbook can be consumed by different people in different ways, right? Like a design leader or a head will consume it in a very different way than a product manager. Someone who's contributing will have a very different idea, like, okay, I want to add my case study here so that someone can consume it itself. How the playbook it should evolve, because it's very simple to make a playbook one time and then just leave it and hope for this thing. You need to nurture it. It's almost like gardening, right? So you need to have a set of gardeners, which I would say is an editorial team. So in in one of the companies I was working in, when I was in my notice period, I was trying to work on the playbook to show that okay, this is something that all my learnings and all can come this way, and we can have the team start using this as a way to work work forward. But not just that, but because there were new people joining the company, there were new team members or external team members working with you. There had to be a place where they could go to discuss and then obviously follow up with the person itself, right? So so this is like a playbook of who will be required in the playbook. So there needs to be someone who compiles the information, someone who crafts the playbook, and someone who makes sure that we are not having consistency issue itself. And at a higher level, a playbook is basically, it's broken into plays and packs. Now, what I mean by that is that plays are, what are the, how are you playing this game, right? I mean, this is the book, and your play can change based on your situation, based on your project and all. So for this one, I had made the processes, initiatives, and frameworks as three different things, where processes are, what are the processes being followed? So what are the processes for onboarding? Because I was involved in a lot of, project pitching, project proposals and all with the team, there was some sales thing. How can we help the sales team do a better job? And at the same time, the actual operations of a project itself, right? So those could come in. And within an onboarding, you would have how would you orient a new person? Because let's face it, when someone joins a team, they're pretty overwhelmed and they're pretty scared of okay, what they have to do. So that itself is something that this playbook could help in, along with what the sales, what are the things, how do you go about scoping a project, how would you go about proposing and all, and how would you go about handling the project itself, and various initiatives like content and all.
Right. So, one of the things that immediately stands out to me, and I imagine to anyone else who's going to be watching this video after we put it out, is the pleasure of seeing information organized like this, right? And this is where, your designer ethos completely comes through, right? Because it takes a particular kind of mind and training and experience um, uh, to be able to present information in a way that is structured and yet interactive. Because otherwise, if it was just structure, like you said, you could just dump the whole thing into a single long form doc, create a PDF, and say, this is what you've got to use. But that is not how this is. I think even just in the pure interaction of things, the fact that you have so many toggles just makes it more interactive. Just the act of toggling, right, just gives you a sense of dynamism, right, to the document. So I have a question, however, here for you. As someone who loves Notion herself, I see the value in the tool. However, since Notion, I want to attribute it to Notion and its success that Google Docs now has incorporated a lot more features and functionalities to make it even more interactive. Earlier, it was all about comments and live comments, and that's what it was about. But now you have shortcuts, right? Like at mention, and you can mention names, you can add dates, you can create dividers just through shortcuts, stuff that Notion was built on. Notion was built on like keyboard shortcuts to do things very quickly and do things. So have you used Google Doc in like its newer avatar? And if so, how does it compare in terms of the job to be done with Notion?
Sure. I think I definitely like Google Docs. I mean, Google Docs, Google Slides, any of the Google suites, and right now the Microsoft suites also, especially because in the current company, Microsoft is preferred over Google.
Okay.
I definitely see an advantage, and I think I would say there is a notionization of of other platforms happening. I think it's a good thing because personally, I always believe that as I said, the tool is not itself important. It depends on what you prefer. I mean, I consume a lot of content on this tool versus this tool. What is better? And to be honest, I feel that sometimes too many features. And as speak this as a UX designer, also when you become into a feature factory and you try to do that, you're giving so much. The creativity can become stifled because creativity is actually best when there's constraint, right? Like think about Notion, like the fact that they limit you number of sizes you can do and number of colors you can do automatically means you have to be creative about it. In this entire playbook, I've tried to be very creative about the way I've used colors itself. So anytime that I've depicted blue, that means there's something to deep dive into. You can go into a page itself. Anything that's yellow is like as an added notion. Anything that's green is this is the final page. So I think you can do a lot more because it forces human creativity when there is limitations. But having said that, I do believe that Google Docs and all have have something going for them because it's an entire suite. What Google can do is try to get different different softwares, whether a Google Slide, a spreadsheet, and all combine itself. The idea of sharing is a lot easier in all itself. So there is an advantage there. But I think it's also about inertia. Like, I mean, because I started off in Notion and my entire life is here, what I see it is not a competition, but an integration. So I'll do everything here, but if something is in Google thing, I'll just attach it as a link that can be seen there itself.
Understood. When did you, out of curiosity, when did you discover this tool? When
I
did you
think it was 2 years. I mean, I knew about Notion 2, 3 years back, but
Okay.
I follow a lot of these productivity gurus, and they were like, talking about how better than Apple Notes for note-taking applications and all. There is, there's Obsidian, there is, there are other things. There's Bear and other ones. And I think Notion was something that the person showed and all. And I was, so I was struggling from like this person who used to make notes quickly on my phone to coming to a platform and all. And I wanted the platform where so the one big problem I always face is that if I can find references, I'll put it in a place. And I have this problem in Notion also, where I put it in a place, but soon it becomes a graveyard of all the references, because great, you found something, but when are you going to refer back to it, right?
Right.
I see Notion giving me the opportunity, though even in Notion, I have this tendency of just putting a laundry list of things and then later on forgetting it. But then I can convert it into a database. I can index each of the artifacts that I found, and later on I can sync it up. Now, there are better tools that way. There are tools that can give you a more graphical representation. I do personally believe that Notion is probably going to go there too at some point of time. It's a tool that is listening to its community. And I follow every single update of Notion. Like, it's almost like the Apple, keynote speaks that happen. And my first instinct to see how I can apply it. Like even this framework I'm showing you now with the addition of Notion buttons and all, I am thinking of how I can do it. I have actually applied it in my personal work. I have it here where I'm trying to think of. Sorry, just one second. So, like example, this is my personal projects to-do list and all. And the fact that I'm showing it to you means now I have to do it at some point of time. Like uh, like what are the activities I have to do, and then I come I have to make a timeline. So one thing I have done is that the Notion buttons, right, I have actually created it. So anytime I have to create a new project in a different content unit, so in mathematical I have different content types, right, short content, long form content. Instead of reinventing the wheel, I can just press a button and it'll create the it'll create that particular content type itself here, right? And I think then I can see and track it according to my thing. Now this is something that I've just applied it on my personal things. I will have to look and see how I can apply it on my on the other this thing on my playbooks and all itself.
Right, right. Okay. So you are, I mean, you're an expert user of Notion. I'm gonna just seeing what you have shared so far. It's not just that you're using it to manage tasks and create a repository of documents or even databases that are linked. Because sure, that's like base level where it's helpful, but you're definitely at another level only. I mean, that I'm pretty sure about now after seeing all this. So it seems, however, that the adoption of this tool, the trigger was you were following people who were aligned with how you look at the world and how you think about, organization of information. And that's where someone dropped the name and you tested it out and you saw that it could do things for you. And one of the first things that problem that it solved for you was the ability to organize your references. Would you say that that was at the beginning?
Organize my information altogether. I would say that from going into a list mode to going into a interactive nodal mode was the main thing. A reference becomes one artifact, so one type of content.
Correct. Yeah, because you had sheets for databases and you had just regular Excel if you had to do that. But you're right, you can't change the view. And you can't create links inside it and link databases, which is like another level of complexity. So where does this tool fall short? Or how does it fall short?
I think that's an interesting question because there are very a lot of areas where I feel it could do better. Like so, one of the things that I feel is that their tables, while the database is not good, it doesn't have the capability of maybe like a spreadsheet. So recently, like me and my wife were trying to do financial tracking and all, and we realized that like you can't sync between like one cell to another cell the same way you could do it on a Google sheet and all. So I keep toggling myself back and forth between two of the like two of these tools, because in Google, in any sort of a Excel or a a spreadsheet, any sort of a spreadsheet, you can do mathematical calculations very, very easily. But in Notion, I don't think the table view, even the simple table view, is powerful enough yet to do the thing. So sometimes my first instinct is that if I'm creating a table, should I even use Notion? Should I use a Google Sheet and then just link back here? Because this is definitely a good place to organize your information, but sometimes it can be a problem for anything that requires like anything that requires complexity in terms of like the special tabular data format or data crunching or anything like that. Maybe people who are very good at formulas. I mean, I know you called me an expert on Notion, but I still feel like I'm like level 2 of level 5, where there are people who are creating customized plugins and all. I'm not there yet, but I do want to get there at some point in time.
Yeah. Well, you're at least a 3. I won't say 2. I'd say you're at least a 3. If the scale is up to 5, then you are definitely inching your way up. Okay, fine. So that makes sense. At the level of actual calculations and any kind of statistical analysis or engagement, you have more powerful tools. Other than that, is there any other space where you find the tool falling short?
The other thing I think it does fall short, I think, especially is in terms of because like, within the database also, I sometimes want to be able to cross-link between two different databases, or sometimes I want to allow for like color coding and other things also, like, within this thing, maybe a database and other things, that becomes a bit of a problem sometimes. But I would say the one big problem, and this is more of a, I would say it's a UX problem. It's not a feature problem, because features will improve. I don't believe that, like I can go on talking about what they can improve. I can be very pedantic about like databases and all, but I do feel it's a little, sometimes weird about the tool is that I can share this as a maybe as a link to you, right? So Tapsi, if I can share this link particularly with you,
Yeah.
unlike Google, where this thing, where if I share the link, somehow I've noticed that if I share this entire link, you will be able to access everything within, like, all the pages and all. Recently, they came up with the whole permission thing and all, but for a longest time, I had to find a very jugaad method of, hiding links and all. I found like a Notion formula that can hide it and all sort of a thing. So those things are, they're not really helpful sometimes, because you want to, especially if I want to create templates and I want to be able to do the and third thing I would say, even in this terms of like, when you see these sync blocks, right?
Yeah.
Sync blocks can be fascinating when you're copy pasting it on different places. But
Yeah.
then sometimes if I want to have sync block and I want to have a sync data, or I want to have a table or anything, or if I want to have this, what I showed here itself, right? Like example, I had these three in three different boxes, right? If I had a sync box and I shift it somewhere else, sometimes it could, it'll collapse into a list view. And it's really frustrating that, sometimes you don't want a list view. You want, like, the three boxes together
On the
and so.
design block.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
again, there are hacks. I mean, I
Yeah.
found very smart hacks that, okay, you put this, no, like you choose this certain thing, and then how you go about doing it and all. But I do feel like, it's like, again, like, trying to go about it rather than like making it easier. And sometimes, you want to have an idea, like you want to type something quickly, because Notion still allows for formatting. I feel like, what happens is you get a little bogged down with, okay, what layer is it? Is it should be a header 1, header 2, header 3? And I do feel like sometimes, like when you want to just write, something like a notepad is even better than this thing, because the notepad forces you to just focus on the text, the words
Yeah.
itself.
And
So
not the formatting.
exactly, yeah.
Right, right. So let's come back to how we even got to Notion, right? Was the idea you saying that, hey, I want to create a culture, right, of valuing productivity and templates and a way to do your job better, and then give people the actual workflow that I may have set up
Yeah.
in order to execute. So coming back to that point of creating a culture, how does Notion enable you to do that? Is it at that, so this
Yeah.
playbook that you created, right? That's where we started saying, here's something that people can, but would you say, let me ask you this, how has the adoption of that playbook been? Is that your cultural play? Is that what you're saying? Is that how you are imbibing a culture, saying, hey guys, here's something I've created, just look it over and let's talk about it, or whatever?
It's been a bit of other things. So I think that's always been a challenge. Like I would say, like something like this playbook. Before I show you another playbook, another artifact I made for another playbook that was there. So this was like, when I'm orienting someone and all. So like a person will come, they want to know what are the processes you follow in design generally. They want to study some case study material. Like, okay, what are the case studies that they can study? So these are actual projects that I had done. So you can, like, go into like different this thing and see the recordings and all sort of a thing of it. Or you can even add new product, new projects and all sort of a thing, right? But here's an example of adoption. So because there has to be a lot of reading and all. So while there are references, you also want to know the people in the team, right? A new person wants to know it. So I created this area where, like, okay, everyone has to give their top readings, what you like and all, so that you get to know the person, but at the same time you're also learning something. And you may not be someone who likes books as much as, like, watching something. So fine, talk about what are the things did you watch and all, and it kind of gives you a sense, gives you a little bit of like a sneak peek at the person's personality also, right? So this
Of course.
becomes a thing. But to your point about, like, adoption, I mean, there have been times where, like, people will consume it passively. To get someone to do an active this thing, sometimes you have to create a framework. So there is a framework, like for content playbooks. I have been creating many frameworks that would help a content this thing. So here's an example of a thing. So Just to give you a context, because I used to handle content design team and I come from a content design background, not just a UI execution and all. I try to talk a lot about like how can you writing, doing content design, not just fixing copies. It's also about understanding the communication and all, right? So let's take the example of error messages. Every product has error messages which come from the backend, and someone has to fix the error messages. And error messages automatically are a edge case. They are basically a time where something is going wrong, right? So when you have to fix error copies, or you have to make the copies, the team was struggling of like, okay, how do we standardize it? So with the team, I came up with this whole thing of like, let's make an anatomy of an error message. An error message has 4 parts. It has impact, it has cause, like what happened, what caused it, what is the action, and what you can follow, right? Now, anytime an error message would come to us, would come from a product or a dev team in sort of a code format. So this is how it would come. Like, you would have this error code, timeout, please call later, right? This is what was said. Now, the content team has to create the content around it, right? The first instinct for any content person and any writer is to just write it and then say, does it sound good, right? But there's a problem in that sort of an approach. The problem is that, there's no way of knowing if we are, just because something sounds good doesn't mean that it's doing the job, right? So what I would, get the team to do is that, as you see, there are 3 aspects of it. Any content function: compile the information, craft your message, then check for it. Sometimes the person who's crafting should not be the person who's checking, just to make sure that there is thing, and then you can consolidate and pass it on, sort of a thing. So this was a 3C content function that I created. But even within the thing, right? So what I would say is try to break down the thing. So example, for the impact, write a sentence here. Mark it as like, this is an impact. So we know that this is an error timeout copy, so you can say unable to process request, then what is the cause? There is some technical issue because right now we don't have the information, right? And then you can write what is the action a person can take, and then if there is a follow-up, right? So similarly, like for any of these error cases, sometimes you would have a question also that, okay, I don't think we need a follow-up, this thing, we just need
You're
the
able to organize the information in the way that you're showing me. This allows you to focus on one thing at a time.
Exactly.
So in this kind of layout, you can say, okay, if it's for this kind of error code, this is where it falls in. When it's this, and the power of a software to allow you to do this, because you're obviously filtering the database to show you different views, right? So in order to do this, you need something like this platform to do that. So wait, I have a more fundamental question, okay, Anupriy, at this point. I've seen how you're using Notion to achieve your goals, personal goals, but also in creating a culture, creating interactivity, getting teams to get to know each other. But this is a lot of information for someone who may not be exposed to Notion. Forget Playbooks, like not to the tool also and the content also, right? So let's stop the screen share for a second and just walk me through when you have created these resources that you passionately believe, have a purpose of bringing people together and making things more transparent. How has the reception been on the other side?
Yeah, so I think I would definitely agree about being overwhelming. And the thing is, sometimes I do this sometimes as a social experiment also, because I don't believe, something being overwhelming, is always necessarily a bad thing. So I have this sort of like I remember just recently having a conversation on a team where we were trying to map out an ecosystem. Again, I was creating a new framework on story, like how to do it. But this was on a different platform like FigJam. And again, this question came, no, but this is getting very complicated, right? So I definitely said one thing that, look, we are not here to, before we can eradicate, complexity, we need to expose complexity, right? The idea of, right now, when I showed you this thing about, like anatomy and all, sometimes the reason I did this, or why I believe we should do this, is to show that, look, copy is not just about writing a simple copy. It requires so many things. So like example, in compiling, many times, writing communication, writing a copy is also about finding the right information. You may have to challenge it. Sometimes it's about challenging an information, that this information is not right. This is not ethical to say this versus this, right? So I would say that the first thing I want to do with the tools, right? And I want to have the reaction. So if I'm working with you, Tapsi, I would also be like, if you tell me that's overwhelming, right? Obviously, I'll work with you to make sure that, how can we make it more consumable for you to work, because it has to be worked on. But for me, that's also a data point that, okay, this was overwhelming. Why? Because it was a lot easier when we were doing it intuitively, when we were just winging it, right? But it's a lot more complicated when we are trying to break down every information into data points, and now we're trying to question it, and we have a tool where we are, having a whole tracking mechanism for all data points, and then we are
Yes.
suggesting what needs to be shipped, what doesn't need to be done. I believe that that is required. So I would say I have had different varied success in different things. I am always the first one to let go of a framework or a process that is not working. I mean, there are many frameworks. In fact, I had so many tabs open. There would be frameworks which have not seen the light of day, and suddenly after 2 years, I'm like, what if we use it this way, right?
Yeah.
Tool adoption is always a problem. I mean, I've had questions that, but why can we not do this on, can we make a website out of it, not do it on Notion? And I would always be the first one to say, let's do it, right? But why are you asking that? Is it because, are you is this because, you're biased against a tool, or is the information more important, right? Sometimes I would even say that, Notion, what the problem happens is that if I want to pass on someone and someone's not onboarded in Notion, this actually happened with my wife, where I was trying to work with her on one project part, and she wasn't a keen Notion of a person, right? So when I invited her, she's like, I have to download it and all, it's not worth it, right? Just share the viewable link for me. And I'm like, no, but you need to edit it, or you need to actually, I don't want you to put a comment, I want you to edit the things, right? So there is that sort of a pushback and all, and I don't believe that's a Notion thing, that's any tool, right?
Any tool thing makes sense. I think the most refreshing part of this call for me, and kind of understanding what you're trying to achieve by using the support of a tool, because that's what this is all about, is the fact that as a designer, you're able to leverage a tool that allows you to be a designer as you're doing content. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there are both things happening. It's a great place to do content, but it's a great place to visualize. And by visualize, I mean organize, and that kind of visualization of data, right? Because there's an aesthetic in the organization of information, and that is something that a tool like this allows you to do. And I guess in that sense, scratch that itch of being a designer, and yet being a manager and a leader, where you have to actually convey information, right? And also nudge people along workflow. So this was fantastic. I'm happy with what I have learned from you and how you're using this tool. But is there anything else that you would like to share about being a designer, and how Notion or any other support allows you to do your job better?
Oh yeah. So I think first of all, as I said, as a designer, and I mean, Notion is not like an uncommon tool between designers. Many people send their portfolios and other things on Notion.
Yes.
I think for me, for any designer, right? I mean, a designer is someone who's just trying to make the world better one step at a time, right? So the main thing for a designer is they need a space, a canvas, right, to put their ideas. Now, whether the idea comes in a written form, whether it comes in some sort of a whiteboard where you can do that, anything is fine, right? But I think what happens at a manager level, or I would say when I'm going up the ladder also, is that I need to find ways where the idea is scalable. I think, as you mentioned it, the idea is trackable. I'm a big person who on like, how do you track the thing, because it's very easy to get lost, it's very easy to make a laundry list, right? So for me, any sort of mechanism that allows for some sort of a tracking space, right, that allows for shareability. So like as I said, that I make a lot of notes right now. All the notes may not be useful for you. I may overwhelm you if I share it, right? So just let me share this one block of the things, so that you can do that. I know, like now I need to find out what have I shared with you. For me, something like Notion allows me, it's like, okay, this has been shared with Tapsi, this part has been shared, but the rest of the things have not been shared. Or I'm feeling very generous, like let me share the entire book notes with you, sort of a thing. So I think that is what I liked about Notion, and what I think as a designer I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I'm very cognizant of the fact that every different company has their own relationship with certain softwares, right? Like currently I'm seeing the rise within cultures, like let's have Confluence and Jira and other things. So in fact, one of the questions I had day before yesterday was that if I'm building a playbook for the company that I'm working right now for, should I do it on Notion, because then I'll have to use my personal account, and that, or I'll have to ask for license, or should I just do it on a tool like Confluence? And I think for me it was actually an exciting challenge, because if I could convert this certain frameworks and certain new frameworks in that, and figure out that, okay, this works, and figure out more things about the tool that can help, it tells me that, the playbooks that I've been creating are actually tool agnostic, and at the
Yes,
same time are evolving itself, right? And
absolutely.
that is always an exciting thing for a designer, because, when you're not tied up to the medium, but to the matter, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Anupriy, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on how you work, but also how a tool like Notion is enabling that. Because I think, just like I said, getting into the weeds of how you run your life, your work life, is something that we don't otherwise wouldn't have the luxury to do. So I really appreciate your time. And I know today's a Saturday, so I'm hoping you've got good Saturday plans for this evening. And thanks again.
Thanks, Tapsi. I think this is really lovely, and it's always interesting because these things are so intuitive to yourself. You don't really think about presenting
Yeah.
it. It's very personal.
Yeah.
So it really helps in doing that. I'll be really happy if it helps anyone and all. And I'm looking forward for more episodes on your channel. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.